All right, perfect. Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to Coach Transformation Academy's community of practice. We are very excited to have you all here. We're going to try our best to get started on time so that our wonderful guest speaker will have the time allotted to him to be able to share with us some of this amazing information. We will ask if you all will mute yourselves, please. So that we'll be able to not have a lot of background noise. I really appreciate that. So I want to take a second just to introduce myself. My name is Franda. I do the online training program here at CTA. And now I have the wonderful opportunity to introduce our guest, Tendayi. See, I had it really good before we started. Tendayi Viki. Tendayi is an author and corporate innovation expert. As an associate partner of Strategyzer, he helps companies innovate for the future while managing their core business. He has written 3 books, I can't read my own writing, Pirates in the Navy, The Corporate Startup, and The Lean Product Lifecycle. He previously served as Director of Product Lifecycle at Pearson, where he co-developed an innovation framework that won the Best Innovation Program 2015 at the Corporate Entrepreneur Awards in New York. Tendayi has been shortlisted for the Thinkers 50 Innovation Award and was named on the Thinkers 50 2018 radar list for emerging management thinkers to watch. He is also a regular contributor to Forbes. Now, one thing I want to say and share, and I hope that Tendayi will mention this earlier. If you check out his website, there's a very, very powerful statement there. Someone asked him what to describe what he does. And he said he helps elephants do the ballet. I didn't think I would mention that, huh?
I did not.
So now I'm going to turn it over to you.
Welcome. Funny, right? You know what's funny is I was sitting with he was 6 at the time, and we were watching that. I was like, look, I'm on YouTube, so we put it on, and then it's like, what do you do? And I said, you know, in the video, I help elephants to do the ballet, and he took it literally. He was like, he turned and looked at me. He was like, really, Dad? And I was like, no, it's a metaphor. It was that.
I love it. Perfect. So we're really happy that you're with us.
No, thank you very much for having me, and really looking forward to the conversation. The way we're going to structure the conversation is I'm going to introduce some principles and best practices that we kind of drive as Strategyzer that are connected to my earlier work around the corporate startup, and also the more recent work from Alex Osterwalder around the Invincible company. And also, you know, thinking through like, you know, some of the more implementation challenges that I try and address in Pirates in the Navy. But let's take it from a coaching perspective. You know, really thinking about how do you coach leaders to decide and act in an uncertain world, because we don't want uncertainty to be a barrier to action, right? We don't want to say, well, we don't know the variables, so we'll wait until we know all the variables. Because if leaders wait until they know all the variables, it's too late. They've been disrupted. Somebody else has run away with the market. And that's what innovation is. Innovation is taking the next smallest action you can take towards a goal without really seeing clearly what the outcomes are going to be, but doing that in a way that's kind of confident. And so the first principle that we often try to get leaders to embrace is this concept that we call the invincible company. And of course, no company can be invincible. And sometimes it sounds like a clickbaity kind of thing to say. But what we're really talking about is organizations that survive beyond. Actually, I want to ask a question. So everybody, and this is completely off script, by the way, so just bear with me. I want you to type into Zoom chat, how many companies out of 1 million, how many companies out of 1 million companies last for 10 years? How many companies out of 1 million last for 10 years? So just open the Zoom chat window and just type a number. So I say 10,000, 1,000. Okay, that's too low. You got to go a little higher than 1,000 out of 1 million. 50,000. 50,000 is close. 150,000 is too high. Okay, cool. That's 60,000, 40,000. So the number is 45,000. So 40 up to about 45,000 today, so about up to about 45,000. Okay, so how many companies out of a billion last 200 years? Ten. The answer is one. One out of a billion last 200 years. So like, it's really interesting to just see, like, it's hard for companies. I mean, if you really think about it, right? If we're saying 40,000 companies out of a million last 10 years, that means that 960,000 companies out of a million fail within 10 years. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here when we're talking about invincible companies. And so you have to constantly reinvent yourself. That's part of the conversation and the frame that we're trying to kind of get leaders to start thinking about straight away. You have to think about competing on not just product, but think about also innovating around the business model. Have you ever been in those situations? I've been in working with teams where the team presents some sort of technology and the leader gets excited about it. And then they say to the team, you need to put more UX in it. It's like, what does that even mean, put more UX in it, right? But it's just something to say, put something, make it more snazzy, right? That's almost like what they want to say. And you can just tell that they're really enamored with technology. And they really think that competing on technology is what makes companies are superior. But if you think about most of the companies that have come through with like breakthrough success in the most recent years, the technology is actually really basic. Like Airbnb's technology is basic. Uber's technology is actually really uninteresting. But what's actually interesting is how they're competing on the business model layer. And so that's where we really want to sort of have leaders start thinking about in terms of innovation. And then the last thing is, if you ask people what business they're in, they can sometimes often tell you, I'm in the newspaper business, or I'm in the movie industry, or whatever. And it's like, well, the more and more you think like that, the more and more likely you are to get disrupted. So we want to coach you to start thinking beyond industry boundaries and just really focus on customer jobs to be done and how to create value for customers. So it's a kind of a frame of reference that's almost like our entry point. And then we say to leaders, okay, so listen, actually the best way to become an invincible company is to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Like, you need to be able to do these two things within your organization at a world-class level, both of them. You need to be able to cultivate these two cultures within your organization. On the one side, you need to be really great at managing, systematically improving, scaling, and growing your existing businesses. And you need to do that at a world-class level. And then within the same business, you need to be also world-class at exploring, cultivating, discovering, validating, testing, and accelerating new ideas, right? And you need to do that also at a world-class level. And you need to become that ambidextrous leader that knows how to drive that behavior. Now, the key message that has to land for leaders is that you cannot take your management practices and principles for driving your exploitation culture and apply them to your exploration. People often ask me, like, what is the number one reason that, or what are the reasons that innovation struggle within large companies? And when you take all the reasons you can think of and put them in a box and try and place them in under one category, it's simply that the leaders took the management principles they use for driving their core business and tried to apply them to how they're running their innovation work. And so we try and coach them out of that sort of behavior. And so in order to coach people out of that behavior, they need to understand the distinction between explore and exploit. So the question to you as members of listening in, which words do you think characterize the exploration part of your business as distinct from the exploitation part? So if you could just sort of respond to the poll that's just been launched there, it'd be really cool. And I'll sip a cup of tea. I can see like sort of the patterns coming through. I'd love for a lot more people to vote. There's like 48 of us. Right now it's only like 20 votes. Just waiting for a couple of more people to vote there. 10, 15 seconds. All right, awesome. Okay. All right, fantastic. We're at 30 people, so that's great. We can end the poll now and share the results. Okay, cool. So I can see that risk taking wins, and of course, risk taking is connected with uncertainty and searching, right? I'm really surprised that the folks that chose predictability for exploration, that's an interesting take, or like a business plan or efficiency and things like that and planning, because those are things that are not typically associated with exploration. But actually, just to sort of, I'm going to stop sharing the poll now, just to be really clear about the distinction between these two things. When we're talking to leaders, we say like the focus is different. One is about efficiency and growing existing stuff, and the other one is about searching for breakthroughs and trying to create new things. You cannot do those two things using the same management practices. For one, for the exploit portfolio, uncertainty is low. You know exactly what you need to be doing. You know who your customers are. You know how much they're willing to pay. But for searching for new things, you get a high level of uncertainty. And so because of that, because uncertainty is high for innovation, you need a different investment philosophy, right? So investment philosophy for Explore is venture capital, risk style, making multiple bets while expecting a few outsized winners, whereas the financial philosophy for Exploit is safe, steady returns and dividends. So if you're expecting safe, steady returns and dividends, what you'll do is you'll ask your teams to write a business plan, but they're working on an untested idea. So they make up all the numbers, and then you have to decide whether it's convincing before you invest. And so that's really where the dilemma often is with leaders. And then from a culture and process perspective, one is comfortable with execution, planning, predictability. But on the other side, it's about iteration, experimentation, testing speed, accepting failure, rapid adaptation. All of these things are part of that conversation. And then in terms of people and skills, innovators are people who have to be comfortable with ambiguity, and then start getting good at pattern recognition and picking up those patterns and then making some decisions on that. And then finally, in terms of people and skills, right, it's sort of managers on the exploit side. You need managers who are able to organize, plan, and deliver things on time and on budget. So what's interesting, right, is that across the spectrum of explore and exploit, going from low uncertainty to high uncertainty, you can find like 3 types of innovation. And so we have efficiency innovation, where you're just improving your existing business, like what Amazon did with its robots. And then you have what we call sustaining innovation, where maybe you're taking something that you're already good at, like publishing books, maybe applying a layer of technology to it, and that allows you to create an interesting new business model. And then we have what we call transformative innovation, where you're like entering new markets with new products with customers you haven't typically served before. Okay. And what we say to companies is you need to have a balanced portfolio that covers all 3 types of innovation. Otherwise, you're not, investing in the future. Alex Osterwalder says, like, if you're too focused on efficiency innovation, what you're doing is you're efficiently dying. You're like efficiently going towards your own demise. And so that's something that you want to be thinking about if you're a leader. So what we do is, and this is something I'm going to say all the time, a Strategyzer, we don't tell people what to do. We never come in and go, you should be doing this and you should be doing that, you should be doing this. Instead, what we do is we use visual tools to make explicit what they're already doing, and then ask them whether they're happy with that state of affairs. So one of the things we do quickly when we're working with large companies is we say, come up with a list of your top 10, 15 favorite innovations, okay? Put 1 innovation per sticky note, just your top 10, 15 innovations. So we say, okay, put them up, your favorite innovations, just put them up on a sticky note and put them up on a board, on a whiteboard like that. And then we say, okay, great. Can you yourselves classify these innovations in terms of efficiency, sustaining, or transformative innovations? So they do that. They classify their own things. And often they're exaggerating how much transformative innovation they do. So after a while of questioning, grilling, and asking, cajoling, prodding, we get to some sort of layout of what the innovation programs actually look like in terms of the innovation projects. And so looking at this, you can see that this is the typical thing we see. A lot of companies are good at efficiency innovations and sustaining innovations. There's often nothing in the transformative box. So we say to them, this is what your company's portfolio of innovations looks like right now. Is this something you're happy with, or do you want to start investing some more in transformative, in innovation, and what do you want to do next to actually do that? And then they can start listing all the ideas they have about how they might start adding more, making their portfolio much more balanced. But you can see that just the visualization, making explicit their current state, allows them to start to see what they should be doing and what they should be thinking about. And so, I don't know what's happening. And so the real thing that really matters, right, when you're working on innovations, is to really think about how you take your ideas and you transform those into businesses, right? And in the early stages, in the early searching stages, it's all a tangled up mess, which is why you cannot take practices from over here and apply them there. Because as soon as it's almost like entering a black hole, right? Until people have actually figured out something that works, then you can start to apply your traditional business practices. So over here, you have to search, and then over there, you can do what we call execute sometimes. Okay, so I'm gonna talk you through 3 things really quickly that really help you like coach leaders to manage the uncertainty that sort of sits in innovation. One is the principle we call portfolio management. The other one is the principle of how you make decisions under uncertainty. And then the final thing is how do you create the right context for the best ideas to emerge. So let's start with portfolio management. Let's start with how you manage an exploration portfolio. Number one problem with leaders who are driving innovation is they think they can pick the winning idea on day one. And it's a practice that's been in business and in schools for a long time, which is the search for the correct answer. Like you can't do anything until you find the correct answer. I've been in meetings with CEOs that are telling their teams, we need a 10x idea. Like we need one 10x idea. So brainstorm with each other and then come and tell me your 10x idea. And that's just insane because every single piece of research on creativity, including stuff that's in the really great book by Adam Grant called Originals, tells us that the best way to find good ideas is to have loads of ideas. That's the best way to find good ideas. You cannot go to a songwriter and tell them, tonight, write me a #1 hit today, right? The only thing you can do is put them in studio and allow them to write as many songs as possible. And then from there, start selecting which one sounds like it could be a really good record. In the book Originals by Adam Grant, he talks about how we only know like 5, 10, 12 Mozart pieces, but he wrote like 500 in his career. Same thing with Shakespeare. We only know like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, 9, 10 plays, but he wrote a couple of hundred in his career. So the productivity and the generativity of a creative person is the way that you get a good idea, right? You cannot get good ideas by picking them on day one because you just never know. And the same is true for innovation. So we say to leaders, make sure that you're creating a context in which your teams generate a number of ideas and you make multiple small bets and then allow those teams to test those ideas over time. And then over time, you will start to find 2 or 3 things that will become successful within your organization. And so the question I have for you is, if you're working within a large organization and you're looking for that one mega outside success, the one that will give you 50 times return, how many $100,000 projects do you need to invest in for you to get that one mega success? Like, what is the size of investment you need to make? So if you could launch that poll so people can respond, that would be cool. How many? 10, 25, 50, 100, 250, 500? Is 1,000 times 100,000 $1 billion? Isn't that true? So if you had to invest in 1,000 projects, you might have to invest $1 billion or something. Okay, awesome. Just give folks a couple more seconds to make their selection, and then we can share the results. All right, so I can tell you right now, 10 is too little, and 1,000 is too much, right? The number is somewhere in between there. So if we can share the results just to see what folks have chosen, and then we can move on with the, okay, so 10 won, but 10 is completely the wrong, that's far too little, right? It is far, far too little. Yeah, you need multiples of like 20 to times this 10 to actually get the right number. So let me share what it actually takes with you, so you can see. So you want one outside mega success right over here that goes into your exploit portfolio because you're doing well. It takes 250 $100,000 projects to generate one outsized mega success. 162 of these will fail. 87 of them will be somewhat successful, and only one will become a mega success out of 250. And when we're talking about mega success, we're talking about returns of like 50 times return, 20, like 40 times return, that kind of level of mega success. Now, these somewhat successful ones will also create value for your organization. And often, because teams make so few bets in innovation, most of the innovations that become successful in their businesses are only somewhat successful, right? So that's where the 10 number gets you, or the 100 number gets you. It gets you to somewhat successful, but you need to make many more bets if you want an outside success. Where do we get this number from? We get this number from early stage venture capital investing, from VentureSource and others. This is more data. We looked at it again last year for the 2020 investment, and the numbers remained the same. And so, as you can see, like 6 out of 10 of investments lose money, 3 out of 10 will make some money, and then 4 out of 1,000 will be home runs with the 50 times return. Another way to look at it, and this is when I start getting cheeky and being kind of insulting to leaders inside large organizations when I'm kind of coaching them. So this is Fred Wilson. Fred Wilson is a venture capitalist. He runs Union Square Ventures. So his job every single day is to pick winning ideas. He wakes up in the morning and there's always some startup or some company asking him for money, and he has to decide whether or not to invest. That's his day job. He's different from a CEO of a company who one time is talking about an HR problem, then a technology problem, then some other problem, and then later on that afternoon, maybe he'll have to make an investment in an innovation, okay? So his exposure to innovation is daily, multiple times, having to make investment decisions to pick winners, right? And here's what he says about how he makes his investment decisions. He says, I always work or like working with a 1/3 rule, which is that 1/3 of my investments will fail. 1/3 will underperform my expectations, perhaps just give me the money back that I gave them. And then I will make all my returns from the 1/3 that meet my expectations. So he's basically saying, I have no clue what's gonna hit. 66% of the time, it's just gonna be like a failure or just a dud. And then I'll make all my money on 1/3. Meanwhile, live somewhere in a large company in Dubai, there's an exec who's going, I don't like that idea, but I like that one. So I'm gonna give that one $3 million, right? It's like, that's not the way this works. This works by making multiple small bets and then tracking progress and seeing which things are making progress, and then doubling down investment on those things that are making progress and divesting from those teams or innovation projects that are not making progress. So that's one of the things that we always try to coach, which is leaders don't pick winners. Instead, they create the conditions for the winners to emerge. And that's a really fundamental principle for leaders to take with them if they want to decide under uncertainty. And here's an illustration where one of the companies we work with, Bosch, Strategyzer, we do a lot of work with Bosch. They have an innovation accelerator, the accelerator program, which kind of has allowed them to sort of implement a sort of fast way to actually test. And within that, the way that they worked when we were collaborating with them was that in the first phase, they invested in 200 teams, and those teams were given 3 months and 120,000 euros to kind of work on their projects. And then 70% of those teams failed, which left like 60 teams that then got moved to phase 2, got 300,000 to further develop their projects. And then 75% of those stopped, and only 15 of those became real businesses. Now this happened over a period of 2 to 3 years, but this was investment principle that they were using. Now the question that should then happen in people's minds is, how do you decide which of these 200 teams become these 60 teams, and which of these 60 teams become these 50 teams? That's really that's really the question. Not how do you find a winner? Okay, so how do you then decide under uncertainty? How do you make a decision between these teams? So the first thing that as a leader you have to embrace around innovation is that innovation is not about R&D and it's not about technology, okay? There's loads of companies. If you think about the Nintendo Wii deliberately created inferior technology to Sony and Microsoft, but still had a pretty successful product with the Wii because they focused on making stuff people want, which is customer value, and also figuring out a really great business model to deliver that value to customers. And so this is the formula that we say innovations have to solve. It's not just about being on time, being on budget, working on a piece of technology, launching an app. Every time I tell companies that they need more innovation, they go, we innovate. John, didn't we launch that app last year? It's like, yeah, sure. But what was the value that came from that? Do customers really love it? Are you getting loads of engagement? Are you getting high levels of retention? And what is the business model impact of that? Are you getting high levels of revenue growth? What happened, right? That's really the metric that we want to measure the success of our innovations. And so it is the job of the innovation teams to spend their time reducing risk in their ideas, testing their ideas over time to find that right business model, that right customer value. And while they're doing that, we increase funding, right? I often say large companies are like rich families. What they have to do is to create artificial scarcity, which means that they start by making small bets. And as the team reduces risk, they get a bigger bet. And as they reduce risk, they get a bigger bet. And then when they come over here where they're ready to scale, they get a really, really large bet. And that's how you then can find those teams that are ready to execute and actually scale. So how do you decide? I want you to imagine that this is your innovation portfolio. Every single one of these icons is just a business model canvas. And what this represents is just an innovation project. So let's look at project E, right? Project E over here. Come on. There we go, project E. Let's look at project E and how do we make a decision around project E? So project E is promising us that it's going to give us 500 million. So far, we've invested $150,000 in it, and they've been working on their project for 1 month, okay? But how do we actually make a decision about whether project E is actually doing well? Well, we created a tool that we call the Innovation Project Scorecard. And what the Innovation Project Scorecard does is it allows us to assess the progress that an innovation team is actually making. So the first kind of 4 questions are really just sort of preamble questions about whether the strategic fit, whether it fits our corporate identity, whether there's leadership support, and what's the financial potential of the idea, right? It's kind of like a broad estimate, right? But the questions that really matter are questions around risk reduction. To what extent is the team in the work that they've been doing, to what extent are they on track to provide definitive answers with evidence to these questions? Have they found that their critical customer segments have the jobs and pains that are relevant to selling the value proposition? Has that team done that? Has that team found that the value proposition resonates with customer segments? Have they found the right channels to reach those customers? Have they built the right relationships with those customers in order to kind of earn from them? And what they need to be showing us is the evidence that they've done that. If they're not bringing evidence, we don't want to keep investing in those projects, right? So that's desirability. The next piece of evidence we want is feasibility. If we've got the right technologies and resources to drive this value proposition, do we have the right capabilities to create this value proposition? Have we found the right key partners to work with to deliver this value proposition to customers, right? All of these things matter, and we want evidence that this is something that we're capable of doing. And then the other one is viability. Do we have evidence that customers are willing to pay and how they'll pay, right? Do we know like our costs for creating and delivering this value proposition? That matters, okay? And then finally, we're talking about adaptability, which is about even if we find all these really great things, can we scale this particular product or service, right? Is our project well positioned to succeed against competitors? What is the evidence we have for that? Is our project kind of taking emerging market trends into account? What evidence do we have for that, right? Are we well positioned to sort of benefit from key technology trends? And then finally, are we positioned or adapted to emerging macroeconomic trends? So we can evaluate, it's a way for leaders to evaluate the progress that an innovation project is actually making. And with that, they're then able to make decisions, right? They're then able to make decisions. And decisions are things like, well, after that evaluation, these 4 projects are not making any progress, let's stop them. let's retire these. After that evaluation, this project is kind of on track, but it just needs to do a little bit of a pivot. And then, so we'll keep investing in that one. These two projects are doing really well, so we'll give them more money so they can persevere. And then project A has become really successful and is now ready to be transferred into our core portfolio. These are all the decisions you can make on the basis of this evaluation. I often say to companies, like, if you want me to help you coach your innovation teams, put them all together in a room and we'll spend 2 hours together. And after we're done with this assessment, I can tell you where every one of those teams are in terms of their innovation progress. And then you can make decisions about what to do next. So you can see that with Strategyzer, we don't actually like come in and go, you suck, you should be doing more innovation, you should be doing this. We just say, here's a tool, let's assess. And then once we're done with the assessment, you as an organization can make a decision about what you want to do with those projects. And that really matters in terms of the conversations that we're having. So the final piece before we move to your questions then becomes, if we're saying to leaders, you can't pick the winning ideas on day one, you have to create the right context. What do we mean by that, right? And so what we're really talking about is building an innovation culture. That's what we're really talking about. And so we often say to them, you don't create an innovation culture in the same way you build a car. You have to cultivate the innovation culture like you do a garden. And one of my favorite quotes is, if a flower fails to bloom, you don't start blaming the flower that it has failed to bloom. You look at the nutrients and resources that are in the soil. That's what you do. And so if your company is failing to produce really great innovations, it is not sufficient for you as a leader to go, we need more ideas. My door is wide open. Come with any ideas you have, right? Because that doesn't really matter. What really matters is whether or not your company, your organization, the soil in which these people are kind of working in, is that providing the right environment for all these really great ideas to emerge? And so we say that, the behaviors that your people show are the heart of your culture, and those behaviors create the outcomes, the results, right? The harvest, the fruits from your garden. But all of those things are sitting in the soil. These are the elements that create the behaviors, right? So that's really what you want to be actually focused on. So we often say to teams, what behaviors will help you create a really great innovation ecosystem? What do you want out of innovation? And then what is enabling and blocking your teams from performing the right behavior, right? And so when we say like build your innovation culture, we're talking about building the enablers and blockers. We're not talking about having a hackathon or creating a whiteboard jamming session or having an idea competition. That's not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about working on the enablers and blockers that are actually stopping people from innovating, and things like leadership support, things like organizational design, and things like your innovation practice or toolbox. So let's look at innovation design. Let's look at leadership support as the first piece of this. So leadership support is how much attention the leader is actually paying to innovation. And so if you could just quickly launch a poll in terms of like, how much time does your CEO in the organizations where you work or some of the organizations where you coach, how much time do they spend on innovation every week in your experience? Yeah, I can see the trends they are working towards what we often expect. It's really important for leaders to be spending time on innovation, if only for the cultural signal that it gives that innovation matters and is important, and it's not a sideshow, right? So that's really why we sort of focus on this as an innovation question. So if you could launch the results so that we can show what people are saying. Is it not working? All right, I'll try. All right, there you go. So you can see the results, and you can see that 0 to 10% is the score that people are actually showing, which is 0 time at all. And that's very similar to what we've been finding in our own work, right? Which is, Alex Osterwalder put this out on Twitter the other day, and again, 0 to 10% is what people are saying. And we often say, like, if your CEO is not spending at least 40 to 50% of their time on innovation. Innovation is a sideshow, within your company. And what we really want is leaders to give their teams clear strategic guidance, and also like making sure that there's a real balance in the portfolio in terms of what they're doing. The other one is what we call legitimacy and power, which is, does innovation matter at all inside your organization? I was once working with a team at TD Ameritrade, and they used to call themselves the home for homeless ideas, which is, if nobody in your company wants to work on an idea, give it to us and we'll work on it. And then they told me that after a while, they discovered that if an idea is homeless when it comes to them, it'll be homeless when it leaves them, right? So you don't want to be a home for homeless ideas. You want innovation to have legitimacy and power within the organization. And so we often say that what you really want, right, is this sort of balance where innovation, or the people that are driving innovation, are at a high enough level within the organization, not a very low level where you're like a director who's reporting to the VP, who's reporting to the chief marketing officer, who's reporting to the CEO. So you're too low within the organization to really have an impact. And so what we often say is, you might want a CEO and a chief entrepreneur all kind of sitting at the same level and being really influential. And then people always say to us, where have you ever seen that work? And so we say to them, actually, you know what? There's a really great Chinese company called Ping An. And what the founder, Peter Ma, did was, he appointed Jessica Tan as co-CEO, and her mandate was to drive innovation. And just from that, they were able to drive outsized results within their organization. And then, just as a way to coach, we ask them to answer this question. We say to them, think of all the innovation teams you have within your company. How easy would it be for leaders to get rid of them? Would it be as hard as getting rid of a key function like finance? Or would it be as easy as getting rid of external consultants? So if you can launch that poll, but so this is a way for you to really measure how much power innovation has within your organization. When you think of the innovation teams in the companies you work with or the companies you coach, how easy would it be for leaders to disband these teams? Right? Would it be as easy as getting rid of consultants, or would it be as hard as getting rid of a key function like finance? See at least a couple of votes for key function there, which is pretty cool. It's awesome. Right, let's give folks a couple more seconds to vote. Cool. So you can see almost external consultants, right, wins always when it comes to innovation. And that's really what we find as well in our own work. Like, I've been running this poll forever, and same results 63% of the time is external consultants. So innovation clearly doesn't have power. And then the final thing is, you really want a great innovation practice where you have the right innovation tools, business model design, a way to test and do experiments, a way to really drive exploration within those organizations. And what we've done is we've created a tool that allows companies to assess their innovation culture. How much leadership support do they have? How great are they at resource allocation? How great are they at portfolio management, right? And also, does innovation have legitimacy and power within your organization? Do you have a bridge to the core? Do you have the right rewards and incentives? And then finally, do you have the right innovation tools, process management? And are you really driving innovation skills, or are they just in pockets? And the reason we have this assessment is because once they've done this assessment, then we have a conversation about whether they feel that they have the right context for innovation within their organization. So finally, and I'm really like closing now, we have this tool that we call the Innovation Ecosystem Assessment, where we say, like, you should be focusing on making sure that your innovation is driving growth, or that your innovation is at least, or your innovation programs are driving transformation. Because what we find sometimes when we go into companies is that there will be somebody who will start an innovation lab, somebody will start a learning program, same company, somebody will start a venture capital arm, same company, these three groups aren't talking to each other, somebody will start an innovation outpost, and before you know it, there's little fires everywhere. R&B lab, entrepreneur program, boards, et cetera, just chaos, right? And so what we say to them is, like, try and take all these programs and map them against, are they creating value? or are they changing your organization? Which then allows you, and you can see like it's all visual. We always bring a tool, an assessment tool or a visualization tool, and that allows us to then have the conversation without, it makes the coaching easy because they can see, oh, look, we have these programs here. They create no value and don't help us with transformation. Why do we have them? Or what can we do to improve them so they can move to any one of these quadrants here, right? And that's the kind of way that we work with these various organizations that we work with. So last poll question, and then that's it, that's me done. When you think of the innovation programs that are running within your organization right now, what impact are they actually having, right? Are they creating new growth, transformation, or any of that, right? What impact are they really having with these innovation programs? And neither. The first one that popped up was neither. That made me kind of smile. Like, well, what value are they creating then? But yeah, this is the last one, and then we're at the end of our talk. Okay, cool. I think the voting is stopped now. So maybe we can share the results. Neither wins, which is, if you really think about it, truly absurd. But that's an interesting situation that, companies often find themselves in. So thank you for having me. The key takeaway message here is just that leaders create the conditions for winners to emerge. They can't pick the winners themselves. My latest book is Tendayi Viki, and that's now available via Amazon. Yeah, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So very informative. And just really enjoyed it. So does anyone have any questions? Because we do have a few more minutes. So does there anyone have any questions for Tendayi? I know that there was one earlier. How about continuous feedback loop while rolling out MVP?
Yes, absolutely. So that's one thing that also really matters, which is a lot of companies, once they launch a product, they're like, okay, we're done. Let's move on to the next thing. But actually what you really want is to be getting continuous feedback from customers and also just continuously improving. In fact, that was a fight I was having just like 2 days ago with one company, which was, if we launch this and we learn that nobody wants something or something is broken, do we have the capacity to change that? And they hadn't even thought about that. They just thought launch is the win, right? But actually that's not the win. Making sure the thing works and creates value. That's really what we want. Yeah.
Ajit, did that answer your question? Oh, I guess he's still muted. So then we have.
And there's a really great question.
He said yes. He said yes.
Yeah. There's a really great question there as well about how about the selection of leaders and how this impacts culture. So me and Alex Osterwalder have actually been working on a concept we call the entrepreneurial leader. And the characteristics of the entrepreneurial leader is somebody who's able to balance this whole thing between explore and exploit, and spend a lot of their time, or at least sufficient amounts of time, driving innovation. Now, a lot of the entrepreneurial leaders that we were able to identify were like founders of like great companies. They're usually the ones that are really great. But actually, and we thought that would be true, but then we also found like some people that sort of bubble up from within the company that become really good entrepreneurial leaders. So if you think about Bracken Darrell and the work that he's done at Logitech, if you think about Microsoft's current CEO and the work he's done to transform the organization, and he's Microsoft through and through, right? He rose through the ranks. And so you don't necessarily have to be a founder. And so what we're really trying to identify is the characteristics of the entrepreneurial leader, and then maybe you can use that in your selection process. Maybe boards can start to look and hunt for those people that are able to balance these two elements. They've also been referred to as ambidextrous leaders in other places. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Do we have any other questions?
So just to wrap up, by the way, just one last comment. Alex Osterwalder likes to say that he learned that he can't convince people of anything. Like if people aren't convinced by themselves, it's really hard to coach them and get them to change their behavior. Like they need to come to you wanting to be coached. And so the way that we would sometimes create that recognition of a problem or a challenge is by using visual tools. So we will make it explicit for you that your innovation portfolio is out of whack. You're focusing too much on efficiency innovations. I remember once making an airline cry because they were really proud of their innovations, but it was mostly stuff like they were winning awards for stuff like improving the in-flight entertainment system. Like, woo, we've done that. And I remember my comment to them was, improving the in-flight entertainment system is not going to save your business model. It is the same thing as the band that was playing when the Titanic was sinking. Like, it is not going to help you. And that got them really upset because they'd won that award, you know. And so just like making that explicit for them allows them to sort of figure out exactly what they need to do. So that's really the takeaway, like coaching message, if you want, from all the tools that I was showing you earlier.
I think you have a couple more questions in the chat as well.
Yeah, that's the one, right? What to do when leaders are driven, but that's the answer. Like I just answered that, right? Which is, well, that's hard. Like that's hard. Like you can't coach somebody who doesn't want to be coached. And if they're a leader, that makes it even harder. And if they're a leader that makes more money than you, that makes it even harder. So it's really, I've had people tell me straight to my face, hold on, why am I listening to you again? Like my bonus is worth more than like literally to my face. Like my not my salary, but my bonus is worth more than all the amount of money we're spending on you. So I don't understand, like, if you're this great, why don't you go innovate something and then we can talk, you know? So it's always hard because it's a form of resistance, and you have to walk away from those conversations sometimes and maybe come back when they're ready. Sharad is asking how to find the why, whether the innovation has to be disruptive or changes the process product. I don't understand what that means, Sharad. Maybe you can unmute and explain a little bit.
See, the part is, certain times we just, we want to innovate. The end in mind is to, innovate and move forward. But certain times, we are unable to realize whether, what's the real job to be done? What are the kind of changes we really want to make? Are we able to understand our customers? Or, what's the end in mind? So in that way, like Clayton Christensen used to call it, the disruption can be, the innovation can be disruptive, where you totally bring into a new line of product or a new solution, or it has to be subtle changes, and it entirely depends on what your customers are looking at and how you're moving forward. So I was just coming from that standpoint.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what we often say to innovation teams in particular, far less with leaders because they don't get involved in the details of a product to that level, right? But when we're talking about innovation teams in particular, we often say to them, listen, like nobody woke up this morning thinking about your innovation. Nobody except you. Everybody else in the world woke up thinking about their own problems, things they're trying to solve in their lives, things they're trying to accomplish, their dreams and aspirations. That's what they woke up thinking about. And if you can't figure out what those things they were thinking about are, and then match them to your offering and your value proposition, you're not gonna get sustainable traction. You might be able to use advertising and some tricks to get a couple of people to buy your product, but sustainable traction is built by a deep understanding of customers and their needs and how that matches your value. We call that problem solution fit. And then when you get problem solution fit, you can then start discovering other aspects of your business model and how to drive your business model. And so that's something that matters. You're absolutely right. You have to find out exactly what customers care about. It is a foundational principle. Yeah. Sorry, it's getting dark where I am. I need to turn on the lights if we're going to stay on the call. So just give me a second. There we go. All right. Let's see if we got more. We can deal with more questions. What is the trend of retaining transformational managers or managers that perform? Oh, the trend is that the transformational managers get fired. That's what you see all the time. So the shortest career is the career of the head of innovation. That's the shortest career. I've even worked with a company where the innovation director was so frustrated because other people in the company were approaching his team and asking them why they're working for him. Like, why would you work for John? Like, like, why would you like deliberately choose to, there's no career trajectory there. And so people are not drawn to the innovation unit because there's no innovation career path within the organization. They can see that the head of innovation is like 3 layers down. They have no power or influence. And so, yeah, no, I mean, I've worked with several innovation people that get fired like every 2-3 years, just cycling through. I've only ever met one innovation leader that's had more than a decade on the job, one in my whole life. So it's still a big challenge to try and build that success.
Any further questions? This has been so informative. Any further questions before we end? So Tendayi, did you have your website? You also have a website. Do you mind if I put that in the chat?
Yeah, no problem at all. Please put that in the chat, www.tendayiviki.com. And then for the company, it's Strategyzer.com. That's where I'm associated on. Yeah.
So do you have that?
Okay, so let me type that in. So Strategyzer.com. That's the company. And then Tendayiviki.com is the personal website. Yeah. So if there are no questions, I guess, thank you very much for having me. It's been a lot of fun. And yeah, thank you.
And I thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. And I hope that you gained a lot of knowledge. Again, it was very informative. We look forward to seeing you next week for our next community of practice. So we will see you, next week is at 4 o'clock, Soham, correct?
Yes, 4 o'clock.
All right, so next week we'll be here at 4 p.m. Dubai time. So look forward to seeing you all then. Have a great evening.